Today I'm here with Kinsey from our team. We're going to talk about the most common questions we get from sellers. Kinsey, what do we have on the list today?
So first we're going to start with what are the costs associated with selling a home?
Really good question. When a seller asks about costs, they typically ask their listing agent, which would be myself, for example, what is the commission that they're going to pay? And there's been a lot of discussion about cooperating compensation because historically, a seller predetermines how much, obviously, I make as a listing agent representing the seller and how much a buyer agent potentially makes representing the buyer that ends up bringing the right offer. So that is the most important thing, and it's negotiable. Outside of commission, there's investments you can make to the property. That could include improvements you make to the home. That could include whether you stage, whether you clean, if there's any sort of, professional photography, which we highly recommend, videography to showcase the home in a better way. Those are all investments that we will discuss with the seller so they can make the right decision based on, the property and their own circumstances. Mm-hmm. Other kind of costs associated with selling could include county transfer tax, depending on where they're located, city transfer tax, if that exists for the city that their property is located in, and then also point of sale costs, which in some areas, for example, in San Francisco, there's something called a 3R report, which shows a history of the property and the permits pulled. There's also a tank inspection in San Francisco, for example, where there is a professional type of company that inspects for whether there's a tank on the premises that needs to be removed. These tanks are used in the past, but not any longer. And then also, for example, there are other point of sale, such as a sewer lateral inspection and clearance, which cities push onto sellers to pay for. But when it comes to a potential competitive environment, we disclose the cost of it as, representing the seller, but the buyer could also take up the fee as part of an ongoing negotiations of price and terms based on what people offer. So in summary, if you're a seller, there's three main costs or investments. Number one is compensation for agents. Number two is investments you make into the property. And number three is city or county or state specific obligations you have to pay for.
So if I were a seller, how would I determine what improvements to make?
It really depends on a combination of things. First is market conditions. From a seasonal perspective, when are we selling? Because that's going to change buyer/consumer behavior of what they're looking for and how much they're willing to spend and what influences them in terms of moving forward with a purchase. The second is going to be dictated by the current condition of the property. Now, if the homeowner has already done quite a bit over the years and it's in a pretty good condition, the scope of preparation might be on a lighter side. So there might be, holes in the wall or specialized, personalized paint that has been used that we need to neutralize to the furthest extent of a property needing everything if the property has had nothing done. Now, I don't want a seller to think they have to do work because they can always sell a property as is, which means they can sell it the way it is. We just have to empty it. We have to deliver it empty and vacant, but we could sell it the way that it is without any improvements whatsoever. But what I usually advise sellers is they have a choice when they work with us, because oftentimes the easy way out for an agent is to advise a seller to do absolutely nothing to the property because it's a quick sale, quote unquote, from meeting the seller all the way to close. We want to give options to a seller. What that looks like is there's doing nothing all the way to doing everything, but we want the seller to be clear on what are the pros and cons and how does this investment into the property equate to a bigger net. Every property is going to be different, also depending on market conditions will influence the decision making. That's why it's, I think, very key for a seller to talk to someone like us so we can walk through the property and give really good advice based on the circumstances at hand.
So you mentioned making improvements to your home. How, as a seller, can I make my home more appealing to a diverse range of buyers?
I love the thought because what we want to do is get as many people interested in our property so that I think about it as a funnel. The more people that are attracted to the property online will see it in person and ultimately write an offer. The more offers we have ultimately dictate how much more we can negotiate in terms of price or better terms for a seller, or better terms for a seller as well. So the way that we are able to present our property will dictate how we can attract more people. So if there's any personalizations a seller has made to the property, we will be truthful and we will share that with the seller. That's why a walkthrough is so important, so we know what we're dealing with. And also, by no means does the seller need to take our advice, but it's based on best practice and based on our expert opinion of selling a lot of properties in a certain area and what trends consumers are looking for in terms of improvements or a way that a property is presented. And that is also why it's not just what we do to the property, but how we present it, whether it's staged, cleaned, whether we position certain furniture in a certain way so spaces feel bigger. It's all encompassing so that we can make sure we can attract the right person.
So how does the open house process work?
When it comes to hosting open houses, we want the appropriate amount of exposure to get the best results, which is multiple offers in a competitive market. So historically in a competitive market, let's say it's spring, summer, and sometimes it goes into the fall, we anticipate that appropriate exposure is 2 weekends. So if we hit market typically on a Thursday, that next day to Friday, we have a twilight tour from 4 to 7. That weekend on Saturday, Sunday, we host from 1 to 4. And on Monday, the following week, we're going to give you an update in terms of what people have said. That's the first weekend. The following week, we're going to host a Saturday and Sunday, give another update on Monday, and we typically have an offer date set for Tuesday, which means within 2 weekends, we anticipate enough people seeing the home. If it's a competitive environment, by Tuesday, we should receive multiple offers, which we will get to negotiate for best price and terms, and by a Wednesday, Thursday, be in contract. And it's a quick turnaround. It's a total of roughly 11 to 13 days, but that's what we consider proper exposure, and that's what we typically do in handling open houses.
So if I'm a seller and I'm hesitant to conduct open houses, what's the benefit of hosting off-market?
Really good question. Oftentimes, I will try my best to convey the benefit of an open house to a seller, but I do understand that there is a potential inconvenience, especially if you're living in a home. And that's a totally different topic that we can discuss, whether we sell it with obviously the occupant living there or if it's vacant. And there's pros and cons to it. But in terms of selling it off market, the best way I can explain the difference between hosting or not hosting open houses and selling off market is the cost of the inconvenience is typically how much you'll be able to get for the sale. So even though it is an inconvenience, if we sell it off market, there's typically less competition, which if we create a one-on-one negotiation with one buyer, you can imagine that they're going to try to negotiate with you to see what's the lowest price they can buy it at. So we want to expose it to more people, and that's typically taking the route of hosting open houses because it's convenient for people to stop by during a weekend. Now, if that's not an option for us and we want to sell off market, we typically take a different approach by alerting agents in the marketplace that have represented buyers. And also, if it's not even on market, like as in it's for sale and people can search for it online, that's a true what we call off market. I would have a conversation with the seller to understand, is there a price that they're willing to sell for off market without exposing it, and sometimes without even performing any sort of preparation. Now, I will share that there's a correlation between not exposing it to more people and selling it off market and showing it to less people with a lower price. So it's, once again, a balance of convenience and how much you could potentially get for the property.
So how do I determine the asking price for my home?
We strategically determine list price, and we consider it what we call a sticker price. It's not the value of a property, so we don't want to confuse list price to value of property. List price or sticker price is what we display online on flyers so that we can attract as much foot traffic into a home as possible. Now, you might then say, then why shouldn't we just price as low as possible? Well, there's drawbacks as well, right? If you price too low and the market's list to sales ratio is not as high as 140%, we're probably not going to bridge the gap for you to capture the value of what people believe and perceive the value of the property to be. So my best advice to a seller is to look at the trend of list to sales price, which is a lagging indicator, but reviewing it together and getting a feel from an agent like myself of what's the current trend in the market to appropriately price a property. So for example, if it's a buyer's market, then listed sales price is going to be pretty low. So let's say 101%. That means that it's advisable for a seller to price more transparently because the market is not anticipating prices to go way above list price. Versus if listed sales price is really aggressive, let's say during a strong seller's market, during the spring market, then we would have more of an ability to price lower than the value to attract more people to come in to create a competitive environment, which ultimately, if we receive 5 offers versus 2, we have a better way to negotiate the 5 because we can take more risk in asking for better terms or a better price.
Can you speak to why you should hire an agent to help you along the process?
Oftentimes, sellers do have the option to represent themselves. We call it in our industry for sale by owner, or FSBO. And it's a viable path in the sense that you don't have to hire a salesperson to represent you. In some cases, if it's a really strong seller's market, then more sellers are inclined to think that they could sell it themselves. The reason why you want to hire an agent, there's multiple reasons. The first is understanding the consumer that's buying your home, which influences what you do to the property to attract the right people, which attracting the right people means that more people are going to fight for your home. More people fighting for your home means a better price and better terms. So the other thing is, an agent is a professionally trained negotiator that knows that market intimately if you look for the market's expert. So my recommendation for sellers is if you are considering for sale by owner or selling by yourself, have fun finding a local agent, and just having a conversation may give you enough insight to help you sell for sale by owner, or maybe enough insight for you to realize I should hire the local expert. Because I think the value that's provided for the cost or the investment of whatever percentage they're charging is going to tremendously outweigh the cost. You're going to get a multiple of return for your investment of the commission. So if you're watching this, did we answer some of the questions you have? And if we didn't, feel free to reach out to us so we can answer your specific question and we can have a one-on-one chat so you have clarity if you are considering selling a home.